Hi. Hello, my name is Mary Crouch. I'm a former SPCA family dog trainer for 6 years. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. The definition of a shelter is a dwelling place or home considered as a refuge from the elements. The definition of an animal shelter is an establishment, especially one supported by charitable contributions, that provides a temporary home for dogs, cats, and other animals that are offered for adoption. As a nonprofit organization, they receive donations, are allowed to make a profit, assist in the aids of the animals while providing them housing. As the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA Tampa Bay, is said to be a nonprofit animal shelter, their goals should be to house, provide temporary homes, and keep the animals safe and away from cruelty or harm. After all, their mission is to rescue, rehab, and rehome animals that come in their doors, rescue all that need attention, rehab by providing the animals with the care, training, and TLC required to aid in their healing from the loss of their home, and rehome the animals into loving forever homes. Wait a minute. That's their former mission. Their mission today appears to be fundraise, and fundraise. Pay an exorbitant amount of money, salary to the CEO, $115,000, accept surrendered animals by appointment only, keep the animals in unsanitary conditions, such as feces smeared in the puppy's kennels and feeding them right next to it. After all, why clean it? They're just going to poop again. Secretly evaluating the behavior of animals behind closed doors, not allowing a spontaneous visit from an experienced volunteer. Setting the dogs up for failure by testing them under terrible, stressful situations or sick conditions, and when failing the test, euthanizing the animals, or should I say, killing perfectly good animals. Yes, everyone understands that the SPCA is not a no-kill shelter. However, any shelter or rescue's number one goal should be to give the animal a second chance. Just try. Try to help and save them. Do not selectively choose which animals are saved based on looks, size, and coloring of the dog, and especially the breed of the dog, such as pit bull terriers. All dogs have the potential to be pushed to their limits and react in a not-so-pleasing way. How does the SPCA, that prior to the recent CEO Martha Bowden, hired by the board of directors, go from offering services to rehabilitate animals through programs such as the Family Dog Training Program, which first required 8 complete weekends to be educated on dog behavior training and instruction, and ongoing seminars, instruction given by the previous behavior director, a behavior telephone hotline run by experienced behavior and training instructors to help pet owners desperately seeking help with their cats and dogs, and on-the-spot behavior and training assistance to families frantically searching for an answer so they do not have to surrender their pet. There was follow-up free training support, all done by family dog training volunteers at no cost to the shelter. Additional programs were working with breed rescue groups to accept dogs with additional needs, or possibly senior dogs. There were volunteers in the hundreds, and not to mention that in 2010, the SPCA was the best place to volunteer, and I can attest to that. The benefits to the shelter were many more than what I just mentioned. For example, volunteers networked for financial donations for a shelter that they believed in, for a shelter that was doing good in the community, a shelter that gave a second and sometimes third chance for the cat, dog, hamster, bird, or ferret to find their forever home. By the way, did I tell you that these extensive programs were squashed and dismantled by Martha? So what has happened at the SPCA? I would think that the public would question why there are hardly any dogs in the kennels, and it's not because they've all been adopted, or why the community no longer hears about any positive stories occurring at the SPCA. When was the last time you heard about them in the news? Maybe their philosophy is to lay low and no one will question what they're doing. Remember when Connie Brooks was waiting at the shelter at 2 a.m. to receive the puppies and dogs from the terrible hoarding situations with the disaster animal response team, which is DART? They drove all day and night to bring the dogs into shelters in Florida so they can ultimately find their forever homes. Some of you may know someone that adopted these dogs and that loved them every day. What happened to all the goodness that was the SPCA Tampa Bay? Yes, I saw the article in the Monday paper detailing the Gasparilla event that brought people to the SPCA with their pets. It was a nice event, no question. But what I'm talking about today are the animals that are in the kennels, in the shelter. What life are they experiencing every day? The article featured massages given to the visiting pets. Do the shelter dogs receive massages every day, periodically, once a week? Were they all included in the event being walked around on the grounds by volunteers, as they used to be? Were these attendees there to also adopt a new pet? How many were adopted on this day? It would have been nice to also read about the adoptable animals within the shelter being included in these and information about these animals. Instead, all I read was that there was an event on the SPCA property. And this is the real crux of the problem. All on the surface is beautiful. All under the covers is not what it appears to be. Some nonprofit organizations fundraise, bring in the money, but what is paid out, or in this case, given back to the health and welfare of the animals, is not what is purported to be. Why doesn't the community that donates the hundreds of thousands of dollars question where their money is going and what it is being used for in very specific details? What about the SPCA annual walkathon? What is that money actually going to be spent on in 2014? They collect a couple $100,000. Is this what goes towards the CEO's salary of $115,000? I can tell you that the money is not being spent on difficult surgeries or the surgeries that take a little bit longer than convenient. After all, the SPCA has been known to euthanize sweet, innocent male puppies that are in for neutering procedures that they found had torquidism, or in layman's terms, undistended testicles. It appears that this procedure takes a little bit too long for comfort, according to Martha. After all, how will they operate on all the other dogs? Or not operate, or just conduct euthanasia procedures for all the dogs that were failed by Meg Montmani when she conducted a behavior test. As a nonprofit organization, I would think that they would still be required to maintain a healthy standard of living for these animals, whether they are in the medical department, waiting to be adopted, or even waiting to be killed. After all, the SPCA should be required to meet the same standards as any other county animal shelter, so why aren't they? No organization appears to check on the SPCA shelter. Not even the media seems to care any longer. And certainly the board of directors do not know the right questions to ask, as there is no veterinarian on the board any longer. And why not? It is equally important for someone to oversee and check on the medical procedures and decisions being made at the SPCA shelter with the medical knowledge to address questions like why were there many cases of problems with sutures and bleeding after the spaying process that caused female dogs to bleed, hemorrhage, and die in the care of the SPCA over several months, for example. I can go on for hours about all the appalling actions that have taken place under the management of Dr. Lopez and Martha Bowden. I will close by saying until the opportunity and the commission here takes a step forward to ask questions, spontaneously visit the SPCA, and hold them to the same standards as other animal businesses or shelters, nothing will change and more animals will be killed behind the curtains and without purpose. A dog that needs a little help behaviorally has the ability to become a member of a loved forever family. They just need someone to stand up and speak for them, and here we are. Thank you for your time.
Please, our rules of engagement ask you not to cheer or boo because there's sides to every issue. So I would ask you with all due respect to not do so. We are really looking at proposed amendments to the Pinellas County Animal Services Ordinance. And so the previous speaker, I understand your passion, I understand your concerns, but it's not directly related to this ordinance. So I would ask those who have signed up, there's 2 more groups of 5 speakers for 10 minutes each. And I wasn't sure why I was seeing SPCA on a lot of the cards, but there's a lot of folks here on behalf of their concerns for the SPCA, which I am sure that once being heard here, it will highlight it even more for the board of directors and for the for those that are engaged at the SPCA. So I would ask that you keep your remarks geared towards the Animal Services Ordinance, and Patty Nagel has signed up to talk on behalf of Barbara Erskier, Sissy Muller, Fran Salem, and Natalie Kopp.
Thank you. I know this may not sound like it's relevant to the issue, but we would like that if ordinances changes, that they are put in place by competent and viable agencies, and not agencies that have questionable practices. And that's why we bring those questionable practices before you, because SPCA and Animal Services would be the ones enforcing your ordinance. So I've come here today to talk also about the horrendous conditions that are at the SPCA and the unnecessary killing of animals.
Can I stop you for 1 minute,
Yes.
please? I believe this animal ordinance relates directly to our animal services.
Yes. And the affiliation.
I'm going to ask Mo Freeney to come up to clarify this.
One of the attorneys can jump up, but the only thing that SPCA does that has any relationship to this is they do some of the cruelty investigations. That's been long-standing in the county. But other than that, we enforce all our own laws.
And you also transfer in and out animals between the agencies and perform euthanasias and other practices on those animals?
We have several major partners. SPCA is one of them, as well as Humane Society.
Please go ahead.
The conditions that we have witnessed by numerous volunteers and staff and have been in existence for the last 2 years, with management well aware of and creating the inhumane environment in which these animals are forced to exist. And while your first reaction may be that we should address this with the board of directors, I will tell you that many of us have tried to do just that to no avail. And the inhumane treatment of animals continues. These are a violation of county code, specifically Chapter 14, Section 14-32, Cruelty to Animals, Paragraph 3. Whoever keeps an animal in any enclosure without wholesome exercise and change of air shall be in violation of that article. The SPCA is also in violation of Florida statutes through several of their practices and lack of humane care of the animals they are charged to care for and rehome back into the community. Specifically, Chapter 828, Animals, Cruelty, Sales, and Animal Enterprise Protection. Section 828.13 speaks to the confinement of animals without sufficient food, water, or exercise, keeps an animal in any enclosure without wholesome exercise and change of air, or abandons those animals to die, are violations of the law. At the time I began volunteering for the SPCA in 2007 as a family dog trainer, there were over 400 volunteers helping to care for the animals. On any given day, we were concerned when the animals did not get out at least twice a day. Today, there are about half of that amount of volunteers and only a handful of dog trainers, dog walkers, and dog adoption volunteers. Because of this reduction in workforce, the dogs often do not get out for days at a time. I have not only personally witnessed this, but I have also had a conversation with Martha Bowden on December 14th, 2013 at 1:30 p.m., where I indicated to her that none of the dogs in B Kennel had been out since December 12th, 2 days, and only 2 had been walked in any of the other kennels that day. In front of witnesses, and to my horror, she stated, "Thank you, I'm well aware of that." The grounds are often in need of care, and garbage is often only picked up when the cans are overflowing. I have called a few code violations in personally to the city of Largo, and they pick up the mess temporarily. There are pictures of surgical gloves scattered on the ground by the dumpster that were there all day in spite of management's awareness of the health and safety issue. You can view this picture, along with many other pictures of the filth and neglect that the dogs have been subjected to on a page titled SPCA Tampa Bay, behind the kennel doors. I personally took some of these pictures, taken on a Saturday afternoon while the facility was open for business. There are also pictures of food bowls placed on top of puppy feces during afternoon feedings and cockroaches littering the floors, among other atrocities. The SPCA is also in violation of other Florida codes, Chapter 823, Public Nuisance, in that each public, private, or animal shelter, humane organization, or animal control agency operated by a humane organization or by a county shall prepare and maintain the following records and make them available for public inspection and dissemination for the 3 preceding years. There are several items listed. Both the Pinellas County Matrix and the SPCA do not comply with these categories and do not identify transfers from out of state and transfers within state. And at the same time, both of these organizations have more empty kennels than full ones and euthanize local dogs to make room for dogs transferred from out of state that bring in more money, for example, puppies. Surely we would not condone bringing more puppies into the community while turning our backs on the dogs that are already here. There is also of concern because we believe that both organizations violate admission laws and county ordinances, Section 14.48, impoundment. This ordinance states that dogs with identification should be held for 7 days and dogs without identification for 4. Various staff and volunteer have had knowledge of animals brought in, never recorded, and just euthanized. The data must also include dispositions by other categories. By not providing a beginning or ending inventory, it's impossible to accurately track the outcomes of the animals at these facilities. And when records are requested, we are told we are either not privy to that information or they are still in the process of preparing the information. Yet the statute required the process be in place by July 31st, 2013. Chapter 823.153, any of these same identified entities which routinely euthanize dogs based on size and breed alone must provide a written policy. Dogs euthanized due to breed, temperament, or size must be recorded and included in the calculation of the total euthanasia percentage. Again, we are refused access to this information and policies which govern such practices. I have witnessed dogs in need of too much medical attention killed because they won't turn a profit. I have seen dogs killed because they were terrified in the kennel environment and not given an opportunity to reside in a foster home or provided rehabilitative expertise by trained volunteers or personnel. I use the word kill on purpose. Martha Bowden insists that the volunteers and staff use the term humane euthanasia and not kill. But that is a misuse of the term because euthanasia is derived from the Greek word meaning good death and refers to the practice of intentionally ending a life in order to relieve pain and suffering. These dogs are killed for no other reason than they happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I believe many of you might have the misconception that these euthanized animals are street animals, strays, but you would be wrong. Many are owner surrenders whose owners believe they are giving up their family pet a second chance. Can you imagine your own reaction to being removed from a warm, loving home because your owner has died, become disabled, or unemployed, only to be put in a noisy concrete box with a broken bed? If you are lucky, you get a blanket or a toy. If not, you suffered unable to understand what has happened to you. Any behavior manager would know that you must consider these factors when evaluating the temperament and behavior of a dog. But because of inexperience, arrogance, or greed, many wonderful animals don't get the second chance that they deserve. You can see a number of these stories by going to that Facebook page, SPCA Tampa Bay, Behind the Kennel Doors. Let me give you a couple of examples. Oso was brought in by a gentleman who lived in the adult community and did not allow pets. He was turning over a feisty, adorable poodle that belonged to his son who had been called to duty overseas. He wrote that Oso was a delight and he would miss him terribly, but he would bring joy to anyone. Oso was terrified and barked and growled for hours on Saturday while I was there. I finally grabbed all 5 pounds of him and took him out of the kennel. He was a different dog, playing and prancing and responding to affection. He was killed on Tuesday. Ice. Ice was a Chihuahua that was food bowl aggressive, according to the behavior manager. I worked with this dog for weeks and never saw any indication of food bowl aggression, even grabbing the bowl from him as soon as it was put down for him to eat. Dead. Jinx was a pit bull that the behavior manager had just decided to hate. She ordered her death, and medical staff refused to put her down. So then she ordered that the trainers spend hours rehabbing the dog so that she would have her killed. The poor dog was put through aggressive training for days. We videotaped her success and still feared her demise. One day, a volunteer asked a local publication to post Jinx's story and picture, and her owner, just back from overseas, came and claimed her. Jinx was beside herself with joy as they walked out of the kennel. They charged our servicemen the entire adoption fee, even though they saved the cost of euthanasia. I have other things, but I want to tell you that the Sunday Tampa Bay Times had an article titled America's Worst Charities and had a link to view those ratings. I was stunned to see that the SPCA had a 4-star rating, but then realized they only had 2 reviews and both were 2 years old. If you go to that site today, you will see a rating that has fallen considerably. Please take the time to do so, and on behalf of the animals who depend on you for their survival and quality of life, please hold these agencies accountable. Thank you.
Tina Eichbacher? And I'm terrible with names and pronunciation, so I apologize.
It's been slaughtered many times.
Judy Elliott, and then Joan.
I am opposed to number 29 for 2 reasons. Number 1, only RBI will work, and I think it will, and because Animal Services has a lot more serious problems going on, which I'm going to address now. I began volunteering there in January of 2011, 2 weeks after I retired from teaching. At this time, Will Davis was the interim director and had moved PCAS forward in a very positive direction. I say this because approximately 9 years ago, I was picketing outside of PCAS with a group of concerned citizens over the horrible conditions and the large number of animals being killed, unsanitary conditions, etc. Also, they were operating with a 2.3...
Could you move to the middle?
Yeah.
The microphones will pick you up much better there.
Okay. And they were operating with a $2.3 million budget. The following narrative is Judy's documentation, which begins in March of 2013. After Dr. Carolyn Thomas Olson was hired as the vet because Dr. Taylor was relieved of his duties due to his having borrowed a piece of equipment to test. Apparently, another employee had misinterpreted his intentions to borrow and told the higher-ups he stole it. Judy initiated a rescue program at PCAS in order to expedite the transfer of these animals to other rescue groups. Her efforts over a 3-year period saved many animals' lives, but also saved the place money and manpower. By the way, this was an unpaid volunteer position. Sadly, Judy's workload became too heavy for her to continue. Dr. Thomas Olson assured Judy that they would continue the program. This did not happen. Instead, Dr. Thomas Olson changed the 5 to 7 day holding period to a 3-day maximum for all rescues. Yes, more dogs were killed. Suddenly, Animal Services became a higher kill shelter with over 12,000 dogs and cats killed in 2013. That is on almost 60% of the total animals that had come through PCAS. There's not enough time to go into any detail, but I will quickly touch on some of the major points that are backed up by Florida animal laws, which I researched. Under Dr. Thomas Olson and Director Maureen Freeney's reign, more animals were deemed unadoptable and killed. Animals were left alone to suffer without emergency medical attention. An example is in August. A Doberman died of internal bleeding over a weekend when Dr. Thomas Olson failed to answer the frantic calls from the vet techs. During the same weekend, 2 more animals died under similar circumstances. It is my understanding that since she went home to work many afternoons, it was not uncommon for her to ignore calls from the shelter in the afternoon or on weekends. After Dr. Thomas Olson's TV interview, in which she stated that no animals are killed due to lack of space, the fact is that the opposite happened. Vet techs were instructed not to pass pit bulls at the time. In September, just before this interview, the doctor had resigned, changed her last name to Olson, and continued to work at Animal Services part-time at a very high salary. The rescue program was eliminated, as well as the senior-to-senior program, and slowly the various rescue groups were eliminated. Now I believe there are only two. Director Freeney's door was always closed, and it's never open to the employees other than a few 3 or 4 select people. Volunteers often brought it to Director Freeney's attention that conditions were unsanitary in the kennels. This continues to be an issue today. While Dr. Thomas Olson was employed there, the number of bad spays and neuters dramatically rose. Morale at PCAS is at an all-time low. Bullying, demeaning behavior towards workers at all levels and volunteers is now commonplace. A lot of bullying by middle management is an everyday occurrence. It seems that asking questions is a strong case for removal. For example, a 15-year veteran volunteer who received an award for her service was dismissed and subsequently escorted off the property after asking and questioning procedures. Another example of this toxic environment is an animal control officer who was stalked and harassed continually by a superior, resulting in her recent resignation. I would be remiss if I didn't point out the issue of missing prescription medications that ironically have a very high street value. Director Freeney was aware of this problem. Tyson Youts, an 11-year animal control officer and adoption coordinator, brought this to Director Freeney's attention and yours, and was rewarded by being dismissed shortly after. Phil Morgan was a temporary director. Upon his forced resignation, he presented Director Freeney with a document that I have to be used as an assessment and planning tool for his successor. In it, he outlines the multitude of issues that he had hoped to remedy but couldn't because of his short time there. One of the prominent issues he pointed out was regarding the missing medications. He believed, as well as the majority of the staff, including vet techs and volunteers, that Dr. Thomas Olson had taken the medications for her own personal use. All of this was mentioned in Mr. Morgan's inquiry investigation interview also, which I'm getting a copy of. Another questionable item I feel compelled to bring up is the Animal Welfare Trust Fund. It's about $70,000 a year that the shelter takes in from adoptions at pet stores. This money goes in the general fund for animal services to use wherever they want instead of going to the use of the animals. When we are told there's no money for a complicated spay or neuter, this money could have and should have been used to pay for it. In August of 2013, a number of employees and volunteers of the SPCA contacted some volunteers and staff at PCAS, questioning, among other things, why animals were being transferred to the SPCA under questionable circumstances. After the two groups met, they realized that all of the bad things implemented at the SPCA were also being done at PCAS. It appears that Martha Bowden, the SPCA director, had been mentoring Director Freeney. Under Director Freeney, the following conditions continue to be an issue. High number of kills, a strange increase of owner euthanasia requests, remote cameras everywhere, and a huge TV were installed where volunteers and workers spend most of their time. One-way privacy film installed over all the windows. Dogs deemed dangerous or denied food and water. Volunteer numbers decreased by about 70% to 75%. The number of dogs in adoption decreased by 75%, yet the number of dogs arriving remains consistent with previous years. On a personal note, for the past 3 years, I've been photographing the new dogs entering adoption for Pet Finder. The average had been 24 to 28 dogs per week until a few months ago when the numbers dropped to an average of 4 to 8 dogs per week. Yet it is my understanding that the numbers of incoming dogs have not changed. It makes me wonder why, when building 3 and 4 are filled to capacity. Interesting that after I requested public records 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden there are dogs in adoption once again. I have tried to highlight some of the issues happening at both places, and believe me, there's a whole lot more. Due to time constraints, I have tried to touch on the main points only. A much more complete version of this report, including the Florida laws that have been repeatedly broken, and SPCA's report, is ready to be sent to the Pinellas County Legislative Delegation, the Florida Attorney General, and the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, which regulates the veterinarian industry. I have full documentation with names, but out of respect for them, and because they were terrified of retaliation, I am not using their names here. I believe you, as commissioners, should take it upon yourselves to investigate this. It's the least you can do. Thank you for your time.